Got it.
Hi everybody, welcome to the networking group. TNG is committed to connecting, improving and growing New Zealand businesses. We're a business networking organisation that connects trade, services and professionals in a structured networking environment. We're different to other networking groups. We try and create a relaxed atmosphere for you to network and grow your businesses through word of mouth marketing. This forum, TNG Connect Online, is designed to connect our members and our guests outside of their geographical areas and across New Zealand. We like to showcase a member who's an expert in their field and who's willing to share their knowledge with us or to share their business story. The session is recorded and available on our YouTube channel. Today, I'm delighted to introduce Nick Thomas from Computer Forensics. His topic is the importance of digital forensics for business owners and what digital forensics entails. Nicolas was drawn to the field of criminal forensics while studying mechanical engineering and shifted majors to obtain a BSc in biochemistry and microbiology. Immigrating to New Zealand from South Africa in 2012, he was employed at Computer Forensics in an operational role. Always being involved and interested in computers, he found that digital forensics was very similar to criminal forensics, but without some of the less desirable aspects of that job. Working his way up in the company, he was offered the opportunity to take part in a management buyout in 2018. His varied background often offers a unique perspective to problem solving while maintaining the rigorous formal training required for accurate reporting of results. Thanks for being here, Nick. I'll throw over to you.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much for having me, Mel and everyone. I'm not sure how long exactly I've got to talk on, but Mel's just shaved a good 5-10 minutes off my presentation. So that's a good place to start. I guess now that you've got the background about me, and that's pretty much covered everything off really well. Haven't looked back since moving over to New Zealand and just keeping on. Let's kick off with the fun stuff. If the IT guy can remember how to share the screen again. We practiced this beforehand, I promise. Right, hopefully everyone can see that. Excellent. So firstly, skipping over the who I am bit, what do we do at Computer Forensics as a company? Well, we have 4 main arms of services that we provide. And the company was founded in 1999 primarily to provide digital forensic and computer forensic investigatory services for commercial clients. Shortly thereafter, it was found that a vital part of computer forensic investigations is also reliant on recovery of data. So we also branched off into a commercial data recovery side of the arm. And on the screen here, you can see we do the Recover It, which is our commercial data recovery aspect, the Prove It, which is a full formal forensic investigation, which is razor sharp. We have a distinct focus of an investigation in mind, and that's what we set about proving incontestably and then reporting on at the end of the process. We also have what we have termed our Check It preliminary investigation services, which is a precursor to the full forensic investigation, where you as an employer may have a suspicion that something untoward is happening. Employees are maybe not performing what they should, or you get a bit concerned that someone's thinking about leaving the company and taking your intellectual property along with them. But you don't know. It's one of those where there's smoke, is there fire type situations. We do our preliminary check on the device, and if there's anything that seems untoward, and we provide you with things like the internet history and the file access of the device for you to go through, because you as the employer are qualified to know what the employee should and shouldn't be doing or shouldn't be accessing during their employment on your company device. And then as a tail end of that, we offer advice and services in how to secure your data through our Security arm of things, where we provide general consultation on data security moving forward. Now, I'm talking this morning on the importance of computer or digital forensics to the business owner. And well, what is digital forensics? Firstly, would help a lot of you to know. I'm going to start with a quote from a very old, probably very long dead French philosopher, Dr. Edmund Locard. He's considered the father of modern forensics, as they are. And he said, for any 2 points of contact, there's always a cross-transference of material from one to the other. Again, very much relating to physical forensics, but it does translate to the digital world, and it means essentially that for every contact between anything leaves a trace. There's always some kind of evidence left behind, whether you're browsing websites or accessing files or leaving fingerprints behind when you're breaking into a car or house or anything like that. Digital forensics is a branch of forensic science that deals with digital forensics. We analyze computers, digital devices, and it's important to remember that a computer isn't just what you'd perceive as a desktop computer or a laptop computer. These days, pretty much anything is a computer. Your mobile phones are computers. A lot of cars and GPS devices, even your watch, if you've got a smartwatch like an Apple Watch or a Samsung watch, that's a computer. And anything you do on these things does leave trace evidence behind. So digital forensics merges traditional forensic principles and techniques, essentially to provide a trail of evidence that you can follow in an auditable way, because that's what's important. If you know somebody's up to no good, you need to be able to prove it correctly so that you can take further action against that. First and foremost with that, you need to preserve any evidence that may be present on the device, because without that evidence, you've got no case to move forward with. Secondly, the investigation must be conducted in a structured way. It must have a beginning, processes, methodologies that can be followed along with and reproduced, if required, by opposing counsel or their specialists as well. And the result of that needs to show you what's happened, who did it, and how it was done as well. And very importantly, you need to maintain chain of custody, again, of the evidence. You need to make sure that the evidence is preserved, because otherwise the whole thing goes out the window. Traditionally, digital forensics has always been used by law enforcement to fight regular crime. But as the world's moved on, cybercrime has become more and more prolific, which has then been encompassed as regular crime and cybercrime. There's no real difference these days. In fact, in some areas, I would say cybercrime could very likely overtake regular traditional crime, re-muggings and things like that, depending on where you are in the world. Nowadays, it's employed by private and commercial organizations, so private individuals, commercial organizations, larger firms, especially the big four, will have their own in-house teams of digital forensics experts who follow these sorts of things for their clients, as well as in-house type of services as well. And again, ultimately the goal is to produce a report that can be followed and further action can be taken as well. Certain guidelines must be followed to get this information and produce the reports in order to make sure that they remain relevant and actionable. One of the things that gets done is you never work on the actual device itself. So if you brought a laptop that you think the employee's been accessing websites that they shouldn't at work, or sending emails to the competitors, you never want to have just your regular IT guy conduct investigations or do any actions on that laptop, because merely accessing the device does change the information on it. Temporary log files and stores could be overwritten and purged, completely inadvertently, but just due to the general operation of the device. So we always make we call it a clone. It's a digital copy. It's not just a clone. It contains additional information or metadata about the device itself and the information on the device. And that is what the investigation is conducted on, and any results come out of that. There are various packages around there, various suites of tools, specialized tools that do this. Our primary one that we use is the Ncase suite of forensic tools. Law enforcement around the world use Ncase, among others, which means that when things do turn criminal if they do, the evidence files can be presented to the authorities in a manner that they're used to seeing. They're not just getting a bunch of files that they wouldn't know what to do with, or any weird sort of esoteric data set. It's in a manner that they're accustomed to dealing with, and they can just move on. And vice versa, when a forensic expert is called on to do an evidence review by the defense, you would receive the files in a similar format from the law enforcement agencies or via the lawyers. And again, it's important that we're able to work with those and do our own investigation accordingly as well. I think we've covered all of that off already. Just as an aside, when we've been tasked by private individuals or companies to investigate activity on a device, specifically surrounding things like objectionable material. People are visiting websites that they shouldn't. Objectionable material and similar terms are clearly defined in law by specific criteria. In cases where we do encounter those sorts of things, as a private company, we stop work immediately on that. We contact internal affairs and the relevant authorities, whoever they may be, and all evidence gets handed over to them and they continue their investigation. We can't return any information or hardware or data to anybody else, because then we would be guilty of disseminating said objectionable material as well. So again, the set guidelines to follow when doing these sorts of protocols. And again, all of that falls on the responsibility of the forensic analyst doing the investigation itself. And as I mentioned previously, the audit trail that they follow needs to be presented in a way that is reproducible, because we would need to look at what the other forensic expert has done, and similarly they would need to look at what our forensics experts have done to make sure that the same results are obtained. Because if you do follow the scientific method of reporting and following actions, you will get the same results no matter who's doing the investigation on the same device or set of evidence. Now, cybercrime, we've touched on that already. Any criminal activity carried out by means of computers. So that includes the commission of, transmission of, which I've just mentioned. We can't disseminate any information that may be illegal, storage or any other internet or computer-based illegal activity, and it's since taken off. Rapidly gained acceptance, that was worded quite a few years ago. It's now become the norm. If you mention cybercrime to anybody in the street, chances are they know exactly what you're talking about on that. Computer forensic methodologies originated in the 1980s, so it goes that far back. One of my former colleagues was a police captain in the cybersecurity arena back in South Africa, funnily enough, and he was doing that in the late 80s as well. So it's been going around a while. Obviously, computer use has become more widespread. Associated cybercrime has increased as well and branched out. It used to be things like fraud or objectionable material. Now we're dealing with people are communicating about any number of things, not least of which you've got cyber stalking, sexual harassment, and any of those things that happen on digital arenas like your social media or even just straight email. Ransomware and viruses have really taken off as well, which has become a major issue, probably one of the highest costing cybercrimes around at present, as well as the identity theft situations, which have become far easier to perpetrate, in my opinion anyway, than traditionally back in the days, because everyone just sends all sorts of information out there, as well as more difficult to track down and persecute, because your identity's been stolen. Chances are it hasn't been stolen by your neighbor down the road that the police can go and track down. It's by somebody overseas in a call center that's set up specifically to perpetrate these sorts of crimes as well. These days, everything is digital, and data is the most valuable commodity in the world. That includes your personal information, biometrics about yourself, as well as any other information or intellectual property that you as a business owner may have as well. One of my favorite tests to run in a networking group situation is you go around the table and you ask people what their Batman villain name is, for example, and that's always the age old. It's your mother's maiden name and the name of your first pet put together, and that's your comic superhero name. People will just spit that information out all over Facebook. You've all seen those polls anywhere you go. But when you're signing up for any kind of new account and Microsoft or the bank asks you for security questions, what's the very first two questions they ask you? What's your mother's maiden name? What's the name of your first pet? What high school did you go to? What's the name of your eldest sibling? So right there, without thinking, how many millions of people on Facebook are just saying, well, here are two of my security questions to any number of my accounts. So,
hey, Nick, are we allowed to throw you off your flow?
Go for it.
Okay. So yesterday, my old man calls me up. I sent him a special offer from a wine society or something. And I said, all you've got to do is sign up and then you'll get $20 off your first order. So he clicks on the link that says sign up and it says, enter your email address and your password. We all think, well, yes, he's creating a username and a login, right? So my old man phones me and he says, why do they want to know my email password?
Yeah.
I said, no, you Wally. They're not asking you to put your email in there and your email's password. They're asking you to create a new one. So it's even that easy to catch people. But to be fair to him, at least he was slightly smart and thought that doesn't seem right.
This is the thing. He thought about it, and that's the key. How many people don't think about it, and not only that, they would click on any link because that email at least came from you.
Yeah.
How many people get spam emails in their mailbox saying click here, and it takes you to a page which is not even a legitimate page, and without
and the email can be spoofed so it looks like it comes from me, don't forget.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a minefield out there, especially for an 82-year-old. Anyway,
yes.
You carry on. Sorry.
No, that's entirely true. Good point. Thank you for bringing that up.
I've got another question. I thought this would be boring. It isn't. It's amazing.
I'm happy to hear that, Richard. I'm glad you're
doing a great job.
Well, thank you.
How do you clone? How do you get access to an employee's device? That's the company's device. And how do you clone it without going into the computer?
There are ways to do that. We always prefer, and it's our policy, to try to get physical access to the device. Now, the key there is, and you've mentioned it, you said it twice this time around, it's the company's device that the employee is using.
Yes.
That's the key, because then as a company, you can, well, there are a couple of ways to do it. You can either, and there's a slide about this later on. You can either go in and make a big show and a song and dance about it and set an example and say, well, there's a suspicion of this. We're taking your computer and you'll be investigated. And where there's smoke, there's fire. As a business owner, you have a good gut feeling for these sorts of things. But it sends a clear message to any other employees who might be thinking of getting up to nonsense, as it were. It can also be done surreptitiously. So, oh, hey, Steve, just leave your laptop here on Friday. We're doing a round of upgrades and IT is just going to check it out. We'll physically clone the laptop, as it were, and then have it back by Monday morning. So Steve,
so you do get access to it, but you don't go. You don't go into any. Somehow you copy that whole.
Yes. So we've got hardware that deals with the storage device. So we remove the hard drive or SSD from that device, and we make a separate clone of it. So the hardware that we use is set up specifically to only allow data transfer in one direction. So it's unidirectional data transfer. So there's no chance of any information at all being written back to the storage device. So you're protecting the evidence by doing that. Okay. And there are ways to do it remotely. However, those typically need to be set up well in advance. And the internet's not yet at the stage where you can remotely transfer a 1 terabyte hard drive clone across the internet within any reasonable amount of time. And clones are such that it's a physical again, it's not just a clone, it's more than that, but it doesn't just take, even if you've got 20 gigabytes of data on a 1 terabyte hard drive, we have to get that entire 1 terabyte. And I'll show you more about that further down the track as well. Yeah, most cybercrime, again, this is why we're here as business owners. We always refer to the enemy within. These are people who you've given the keys to your kingdom, that you trust them, they're your employees, they've got passwords, they've got access to all sorts of things, and we like to trust people are doing the right thing with the trust that we've given them. Yes, there are cyber criminals out there, the hackers who are always trying to break in and install the ransomware and things like that. But even then, often it comes down to the enemy within, and very often that enemy, in the case of ransomware, can be ignorance. You have employees who, meaning well, don't know any better, haven't been trained accordingly, will click on a link on an email they've received saying, oh, invoice overdue, pay us now. That'll download something to the computer, and they've let these attackers in. Or it can be malicious as well, where someone's out to steal your intellectual property set up in competition. So I always say people are the weakest link in the chain across the board, whether it's through ignorance or maliciousness, it's still people involved in that as well. And the majority of businesses in New Zealand's built on the back of the small business, and IP theft can be disastrous. It can shut down your business if the wrong information gets out to the wrong people. Again, we've moved to work from home and portable devices. It's easy. You take your laptop home and do your work from home, but that access to your data remains to the employees as well. And again, the key thing is, as long as it's the company's device, you can do whatever you want with it. You can get them to leave it behind so it can be acquired. Bring your own device, or BYOD. A lot of people will sell and say, oh, you can save money. You get them to use their own laptop. You don't have to buy laptops or computers for the staff. But that's a minefield, because they're under no obligation to provide their own personal device to you for any reason at all. If anything, they're doing you a favor by using their device to do your work. So bring BYOD, or bring your own device, should burn in a fire and really never be used at all. A couple of stats. These are old. These stats came from, I couldn't find more up-to-date ones, but a couple of years ago, there were over 108 cybercrime attacks in New Zealand a day. And those were only the reported ones. If you think about the number of people who are too embarrassed to say that they were hacked or breached or affected by ransomware, or they just paid the ransom and moved on because they just needed to get business continuity going again, you can imagine easily multiples of that number as well. And again, a few years ago, it was over $500 million in damage a year reported. That's the key word there, is the reported damages. Plus, it will have escalated exponentially over the last few years as well. We, in our company, tend to deal with intellectual property theft, misuse of company resources, malicious deletion. You've had a falling out with the employee, they're on their way out the door, and they wipe all the information off the laptop and say, well, I'm done, good luck to you getting it back. The odd cases of fraud and employee harassment as well. There's not much time in this morning to do it, but Barton's heard quite a few fun anecdotes that we've picked up over the years across the board on those ones. And people can be quite creative about the ways that they go about these things. But again, ultimately, it comes back to every interaction leaves a trace somewhere. And if we can get to it in time to record and report on that trace, well, there's your evidence. And again, that's just covered things that we've dealt with. These are places where it can be used. In case of suspected industrial espionage, fraud, intellectual property theft is the big one. Forgeries and fraud, same sort of thing. Disputes, regulatory compliance. We've had a few interesting cases along there, as well as inappropriate use of company devices, both on and off company time. So that includes employees skiving off on Facebook all day instead of doing any actual work, or they take the company laptop home for work from home, and in the evening they're doing things that they shouldn't be with it, or at the very least that you wouldn't want your company associated with on your company device as well. It's not necessarily they can do whatever they want as long as it's not illegal, but you may not want to be associated with those sorts of activities, not least of which certain areas of the internet aren't that trustworthy and are just encouraging viruses and malware and things like that as well. And if you're using a company device to do that, it's introducing opportunities for infections to hit your company device, which then accesses your company network and can spread from there. So it's not the sort of thing you want to encourage on that. Some of the evidence types that we use, I said unintended evidence because no one expects to leave any evidence behind of what they're doing. Non-business related use of the company device at work or at home as well. The other thing to highlight here is, again, with the advent of work from home, where employees will take the company device home, or BYOD as well. It's worth a mention because a lot of companies still do that. It does blur the line between what's your time and what's the employee's time, but in the employee's mind. So it tends to, especially if you're using the same device for that. So having a company device for company work and encouraging them to have their own device for their own personal thing is definitely the way to go, because it helps keep that separation and protect your company resources from being accidentally infected or introduced to malware or ransomware or anything like that as well. And evidence of data exfiltration. If you're stealing your intellectual property, you've got to get it off the device somehow or another. So we can see things like that, as well as on the cloud. So internet history, email accesses, those sorts of things, as well as servers. What do we find? So system logs. Your operating system will log any number of useful bits of information, including the obvious internet history file logs. Every time you try and access a file on a network or locally, that is logged somewhere as well. Deleted files. So let's say, for example, someone's made a Word document on the desktop and said, call the file, this is all the stuff I'm going to take from the company when I leave, put it all in there, copied it onto a USB memory stick and deleted the file from the hard drive, from the desktop. We can very often recover that file. So not only have you got a nice file name with a smoking gun saying this is all the stuff I'm going to take, you can see exactly what was taken as well, because it's all in that file that could be recovered. Oftentimes we can't recover the entire data set because data does get overwritten through use of the device or various things happening. So, but we can recover fragments, and things like email fragments are very useful because you can get bits and pieces of evidence and see that things did definitely happen and put together the trail of breadcrumbs to follow, as well as image files. Again, internet history will only tell you so much, but if you've got a snapshot of the actual images that were viewed. And another interesting one is the last one, is print rasters or rasters. Not many people know that your printer doesn't understand a Word document or a PDF. Your printer only understands images. So when you hit print on your Word document, what your operating system will do is it'll convert that Word document or PDF or whatever it is you're printing to an image raster or just a raw image file that your printer can understand, and that's the data that sends to your printer. Now that file has to be stored somewhere, and Windows definitely stores them in a specific place, and it will keep a cache of the last few documents or images that have been printed. And we have, for a specific case, been able to pull up the last few pages printed on a device, and we could say at the exact date and time that a document was printed, because that information is stored in the Windows system logs. And that happened to be exactly what the client was after at that. So everything leaves little traces somewhere. It's all about getting to it and preserving it in time on that. Now here's one. This will answer some of your questions, Richard. This is the the boring technical bit. So hope you've had your coffee. How do we do what we do? How does the magic work? This is a general overview of how data storage works. So you've got all these clever mystery bits. You've got a service area of a hard drive or storage device, which you can't access as a user. It's just involved about how the hard drive works. You got the boot records that tell it how to start up the operating system and do all those things. The partition table and index tables in the data storage area. That all looks very complicated. I don't understand any of it. Think of a book, where in a book you've got your table of contents or your index. On my little diagram, that's what we've got, the FAT or the file allocation table. And then you've got your information or chapter and verse later on in the book. So your index will tell you, go to page 34 for information on what have you. That's the data area in my little diagram. So when a file is copied to a computer, the data goes in the data area, and an entry is put in the index, or the in this instance allocation tables. Different systems work differently, but this is good enough for an explanation. And it says, right, the file called, all the stuff I've deleted, I've stolen from the company, lives on the desktop in a folder, but the actual data lives on this particular area on the hard drive or solid state device. So when you want to access that file, the operating system knows to go to this physical area of the drive to access that information on that. Great, that's how it works. Now what? Well, when you delete the file, you're not deleting the data. Because everyone wants things to happen yesterday, it's got to happen as quickly as possible. You're only deleting that entry in the table of contents. So the data of the file is still on the drive, but the entry to the table of contents has been removed. So when you want to put another file on the computer, the operating system will look and say, oh, here's a blank space over here because there's nothing in the table of contents. I'll put the data there. And at that point, the data is overwritten and can't be recovered. But until that stage has happened, you can potentially recover the data. And you imagine hard drives have just gotten bigger and faster, and they can store more information. Oftentimes, that time period lasts much longer that you can recover deleted information. Now, the advent of solid state devices, that's the newer technology, does hinder that somehow because it's got different operating methodologies. And I'm going to touch on that now in a second. So we can't recover data when there's been massive physical damage to the storage device itself. So the solid state chips have been broken, the hard disk has been warped or scratched or damaged. High frequency magnetic fields also disrupts magnetic storage. It's called degaussing, is the old way that they used to clean up the old drives. If the data has been encrypted, you don't have an encryption key. These days, the encryption is at such a level it's impossible to break without that key, or data has been overwritten. And that's what I've mentioned previously. And solid state devices do have a built-in housekeeping function where they do overwrite data as a matter of course. Once the entry's been deleted from the table of contents, after an amount of time, which varies, the corresponding data in the data portion will be overwritten with blank data, with zeros as an internal housekeeping. This is direct answer to your question earlier, Richard. The way we can acquire the devices, covert or overt, again, relying on the data recovery side of things to find the evidence that people think they're clever in deleting and doing all these sorts of things. And very often we're able to recover evidence that wasn't even thought of in the first place. We did a investigation on multiple devices for an organization at one stage that they came to us. It was essentially a proof of concept. They had all the evidence that they needed to prosecute physically. So they did the old school boots on the ground, collected everything, papers and printouts and all sorts of things. But they brought some devices to us and said, look, we want to see how this works, see what you can find on this. And through our investigation, we found essentially the digital copies of all of the information that they already had, but we had additional information that they didn't have that obviously hadn't been printed out, which led them on an entirely different avenue of things that they could investigate as well. So there's people are using computers and devices for absolutely anything as well. So the 4-step process that I touched on is acquisition, which preserves the evidence. We use our hardware-based write blockers, so data will only travel one way. You then prepare those evidence files, so you validate them to make sure that that clone is in fact a true and correct copy of all the data on there. Then the analysis happens before the report, and our reports are in such a way that they're presented to your legal team. They will come up with they'll draft an affidavit, which we then check for technical accuracy before signing off and presenting that as well. We've also presented as expert witnesses in the High Court, among others, in Auckland as well. And that's pretty much the end of us. In closing, I'd like to say, hopefully this has showed you how digital forensic investigations are vital in, for any business, in the legal process as well, in the fight against cybercrime. It needs to always be done by a professional who knows what they're doing, specifically because it's so important to make sure that it can be audited and done by the other side. There's nothing worse than going all the way down the road and then the opposing counsel brings in their own computer forensics expert and says, well, how did you get this information? Where did it come from? How did we know you didn't just type some stuff up and make any changes to the device? Because you're paid by your client, essentially, at the end of the day. So you need to have that integrity of self and professionalism, that you do things correctly so that it stands up and can't be thrown out anywhere. And more importantly, digital forensic investigations are only becoming more important as more people are using more devices, more data is becoming more important. Can you afford not to look at things like that? And that's me. I did mention, the various services. Something that we're going to be doing for August and September as a direct result of this. If anyone, even if you're watching the YouTube video after the fact, if you mention the TNG presentation, we'll give you a 10% discount on the acquisition service for any device. So part of what we do in the breaking down, even if you suspect something's not quite right, but you may not be ready for a formal or even an informal check-it preliminary investigation, we can acquire and preserve a set of evidence files of any device for you and provide that to you on a hard disk, so that way you've got a copy of anything that might want to be looked at down the track. So if something does come to light and then accidentally the laptop took a swim and is irreparably damaged, and then at that point in time there's no way of getting the evidence files, at least you've got one at some point back in the past as well. And we offer that at a fixed rate of $1,500 per device, and that includes the cost of a USB hard drive. So you keep that in the safe, and if anything happens, you've got it. If anything doesn't happen, well, you haven't spent tens of thousands on any kind of investigation. It's just a bit of an insurance policy, and we'll give you 10% off on that. Thank you. Any questions? Any more questions, Richard?
I have, yeah. So
Unshare your
what you're saying is, if you hit the empty recycle bin and it's all gone, my wife could employ you. No, just joking.
Yes, she could.
It's not necessarily gone.
No, well, that's exactly it. Until data's been overwritten by new data, you can potentially get it back. I say potentially because there's always an asterisk above everything these days as well.
Yeah.
And every system is different and unique and how they operate. And like I've said, the newer technology does have this built-in housekeeping function that overwrites data, but it still boils down to the data's been overwritten.
Right. And one more question is, for companies that get you in and there's a case and it goes to court, the cost of that, is that just, have they just got like liability cyberspace insurance, or how do they recover their costs once they've, is the employers at fault, you know, do they, but it depends on where financially, yeah.
Yeah, that depends on, at least for, it depends on what's going on. So things like a ransomware attack, I would imagine they would need a specific cybersecurity or cyber insurance policy.
Yeah.
For things like intellectual property theft, which we tend to investigate. That very much depends on the legal counsel of the client. You know, are they going to pursue costs from the employee that got up to this nonsense? Are they going after damages as well? What are the ins and outs from their side? That's up to them. Essentially, our client is our client and what they want to do down the track. It also depends on the nature of the case as well, I would imagine, in certain instances too.
And Nick, I've got one for you. Unless I drifted off because I was looking at the beautiful weather outside today, I missed. So one of the things that I love about your service offering is that instead of always being reactive, so generally speaking, it's after the brown stuff has hit the spinning thing that you get dragged in, but the proactive approach of, whilst a new employee is still in their probation period, actually at the end of that probation period, getting a report from you is actually quite a good strategy, because then you see how engaged they are or whether they're spending all day on Facebook. And I think that's a really cool service.
Yeah, well, thanks for mentioning that, Obes. So no, you may have dozed off in this one, but clearly he was paying attention in some of my other presentations at one point in time. So yes, that is. I was trying to keep it less of a self-promoting type situation, but that never hurts anyone. One way that we do try and be more proactive is exactly that. So when you have a new employee coming on board, you'd expect them to always be on their best behavior and do the ultimate to get past their probationary period or contract period, depending on how that works and the size of your company. But a good thing to do is just a check it preliminary audit, which gives you a list of all the files that they've accessed, what they've been doing on the internet browser, both on company time and on their own time, to give you a bit of an insight about what's going on. Because again, business owners, you've been in this industry for a while, you get a bit of a gut feeling about things. And once someone's past the probationary period, you all know how very difficult it is to get rid of a bad egg at that point in time. So if you can do anything you can to avoid putting one in the basket in the first place, that's a great way to do it as well. And our check it preliminary audit reports are typically around about the $2,000 mark. So you're not talking really big money in the scheme of things for that type of investigation or just report or advanced warning. Similarly, it can also be rolled out more proactively as a regular occurrence among your staff. If you've got a team of 10 or 15, you can just cycle around, pick random numbers out of a hat, and then once every 2 months or so, an employee will get their laptop audited, which gives you a bit of an insight of it. It could be seen as a little bit big brotherish, but at the same time, it's not overly invasive, and it again serves to have that differentiating line between this is my device, this is my time as an employer and employee. We just want to make sure everyone's doing their part. Nothing's going to be going any further than that. And it also would encourage people to think twice about maybe should I be doing this while I'm at work, or should I be snooping around and things like that, just to put that thought in them as well.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. There's so much good information there for all our TNG members, and we'll make sure that we get this recording across our whole community. Before we move on, does anyone else have any other questions? No.
Yeah, just on that, Nick, are you saying that the employee would tell the employer would tell the employee that they're going to check the device?
They don't necessarily have to specifically do that. There are any number of ways that you could phrase that. I mentioned earlier it's a monthly IT checkup, just a health check on the computer or whatever it is to let the employee leave the device with the company rather than taking it home overnight or anything like that. And then the acquisition can be done and device gets back to them.
I can see it would be fantastic too to have something in your employment agreements, so that like
exactly, that's what I was going to say, Mel. You need a clause in there that does say, please be reminded that that the company, that the laptop or the computer you're using is the company property.
We may audit that. Yeah.
A bit like random drug testing as well. We have contracts that say that any drug use or alcohol abuse during work time is cause for action. Standard clause would be very, very relevant. So excellent. Well, but on behalf of TNG, Nick, thanks so much for presenting today. So much valuable information there. I've got lots of questions, but I think I'll take those offline.
I just want to just quickly, Helen, Melanie, I think Helen has a question, but you're muted, Helen, so we can't hear you.
I'll unmute you. Helen,
no?
can you unmute?
Can I? I don't know. If
No, I'm trying to do it, but I can't. Helen, you need to unmute, please.
Top right, Helen.
There we go.
You got it? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, good. Yes. My apologies, Nick. I couldn't get the password to get in, and then I suddenly thought I go back in an old email and it might be the same one. So I eventually got it. So hence for being late. So my apologies, because what you were saying was very, very interesting. While not directly involved, I usually have someone who does work for me in this area. I would go back a long, long way in the start of what computing was all about. So, and was a member of the Computer Society at one time, as it was called then in Auckland. So I'm finding it fascinating and very enlightening. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. I find it fascinating every day. There's always something new, and like somebody was it Melanie said, hopefully we can all keep learning something new every day.
Yeah.
I would like to ask a question.
Yeah.
In terms of New Zealand law, is the time that you're at work 100% the employer's time?
Are there any lawyers here? I can't answer that. No.
Could you ever claim that that was your personal time and you were doing your research or whatever, like something to that effect?
No idea. Again, yeah, that's definitely something an employment lawyer would have to say on that. Yeah.
We can take that question to one of the employment lawyers in our groups. I'll get back to you on that one. Yeah.
And I bet you they have a long, complicated, expensive answer for you on that as well.
No doubt. No doubt. Okay, let's move on. We'll do a quick wrap around the room so that we can learn who's here with us today. We'd love to get to know you. So please, can we start with you, Richard?
Oh. All right. You're not recording now, eh?
I am recording.
Oh. Oh, well, all right. Good morning. I'm Richard from Always Property Management. I manage rental properties in the Manawatu region, and we specialise in optimising our clients' returns. Imagine the surprise when not receiving your total rent due at the end of the month, at month end, and the property manager not communicating with you, and so you give them a call and you find out the tenant's left because the flat's too cold. And it's a bit of an ouch because you weren't aware of that. And then so you sort the issue out and you get new tenants in and they stay long term because the place has been sorted, and you go, great. And so that landlord was me. And I learnt that the fundamental, most important aspect of property management is communication. You know, being totally authentic and transparent with tenants is paramount. Tenants are customers and deserve to be treated as such. And a happy tenant equals a happy landlord. So a great referral is obviously someone with a rental property in the Manawatu region, but wants a professional, trustworthy service and understands the importance of looking after tenants is the best way to look after their property investment. That's me.
Thanks, Richard. That's great. Chetna, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Chetna. I'm from a company called Clicks for Business. We build websites for tradies and professionals who are looking for leads for their business.
Cool.
And Chetna, whereabouts are you based, and where do you geographically get your clients from? Where are you looking for business from?
I'm based in New Zealand. Obviously, I'm based in New Zealand. I'm based in Wellington, and in terms of clients, the whole of New Zealand.
Cool.
Martin, how about you?
Me?
Thanks, Mel. Sort of feel like a bit of an intruder because I'm not actually on TNG, but I've known you and Chaff. I've known you and Chaff for a million years. So as you can probably see from the backdrop, Function8 is my managed services IT brand. We've got about 50 staff now in 3 locations up in Asia, Hong Kong, Singapore, and a back office in the Philippines. COVID over the last 3 years has meant that I haven't exactly been shooting back to the office as much as I used to. So I'm now focusing a lot more here in New Zealand on doing mentoring for younger or newer business owners. And certainly I do, as we discussed earlier, massive amount of networking. So the Hong Kong New Zealand Business Association, for example, is another organization that I'm hugely involved with on the exec. And we literally put people in front of people, and it's what I love doing. So yep,
Wow.
that's me.
Awesome. Thank you, Martin. Look forward to talking to you again soon as well. Helen, how about you?
Well, we're moving along with the company being set up on Kenis. Kenis, those of you who are familiar with the word, Ken means I know, and Kenis is knowledge. So because my PhD was intellectual property copy management of the decided Nigel, whom I think you're very familiar with, and my accountant actually have realized that this is very important, particularly in the area for, I think, accountants particularly, because they've got a range of people they know of different sizes of businesses. We're going through that process and we'll be launching it very soon. So it'll be known as Kenis 2021. So that's why I'm not actually active in that area at the moment, but they've got me back into doing all this work, which is actually quite enjoyable because I think it's a very important aspect of, because it enables companies to find an asset that they weren't aware that was a possibility. And that's what it leads up to. So that's what I start off with, knowledge management, because I've prepared, having been an academic, I've actually prepared a series of stages that they go through. So they've got various modules to go through before we get to that, dealing with that very top area. Big companies probably can, apart from one that's compulsory, can perhaps jump up to there. Other companies might just want, small businesses might just want to have the first few modules and then work eventually to going up to the looking for the asset. So that's what it's all about.
We look forward to sharing your journey with you on this forum. Thank you. And I believe we've got someone else on the call on their phone. If you'd like to introduce yourself. No. Okay, that's cool. All right, so I'll close then. Firstly, thank you very much, Nick, for sharing with us today. It's been an absolutely fantastic presentation, and this recording will be available on YouTube, so please share it. We'd really appreciate if you share it on your LinkedIn connections and other social media connections that you have in your networks, so that we can help Nick to grow his business in computer forensics.
Oh, yes.
So thank you. The networking group, we're committed to improving, growing and connecting New Zealand businesses. And we're proud that we're the fastest growing networking organisation in New Zealand. So please tell all your friends to join us. We're very good value at $50 a month in our face-to-face meetings. And we host these fortnightly meetings every fortnight on Zoom on a Friday at 10:30, so we can showcase one of our members. So thanks for being here today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you everyone for staying awake. Thanks for having me. Cheers.